Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Just a Few. My name is Patrick Antwine. Thank you for joining me for these brief videos as I respond to questions submitted to me, or in this case, it wasn't a question emailed to me, it was an oral question. I was asked about this by a couple of people, and I just decided I will, although I responded to them already, I will record my response for the benefit of others who may have this question. When you get a question like this, very often I think about Jesus. I feel like Jesus when the religious leaders almost cornered him with a coin and asked him, they asked him, should they pay taxes to Rome or not? And either way, Jesus answered he was going to be in a bit of a problem, but Jesus wheeled his way out of that quite easily. So hopefully I will be able to provide an answer. In fact, I'm going to do just as Jesus did, and I'm going to use a coin as an illustration for what I'm going to say. So let's jump to the question. The question that was asked of me is, can a person die before his or her time? There are a number of verses I want to just read quickly to help you to understand what my response to a question like this is. Because if I say, yes, there are verses in the Bible, you're going to turn to and say, well, no, that doesn't make sense. If I say no, again, there are verses in the Bible that point to flaws in my response. So let me respond like this. Most times people think of a verse like Psalm 90, verse 10. And let me read that to start with. It says, the days of our lives are 70 years. The old King James speaks about 70. And if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we fly away. This is a psalm of Moses, we are told. And Moses was not saying that every human being has been guaranteed by God 70 years or maybe even 80. That's not what he's saying there. He was talking in that psalm about the brevity of life and how we ought to value and treasure the days that God gives us to enjoy, because they soon are over, cut off, they fly away. So that's what he's saying. This is not some eternal principle that says everybody is guaranteed or supposed to have or are supposed to enjoy 70 years of life. And if you die at age 30 or 20, you died before your time, supposedly. That's not what he's saying there. This is not an eternal principle. This is poetic literature. In fact, most of the verses I'm going to quote here for you are from those sections of the Bible known as Hebrew poetry. And we always need to be very careful when we take things from the Psalms and Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. And guess what? That's exactly where I'm going to take these verses from, because that's where you find these verses that deal with the issue. Psalm 55 verse 23 says, "But you, O God, shall bring them down to the pit of destruction," speaking of the wicked, the unrighteous. "Bloodthirsty and deceitful men shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you." Again, you read that and you say, see, it's possible that you would not live out all your days. He was saying that God will bring down the wicked. He will not allow the wicked to continue in their wickedness. And so that's how it is said in the poetic literature, that he's saying bloodthirsty men, wicked men, unlike the righteous, that God will protect and preserve them. God is going to bring down eventually the righteous and the unrighteous or the wicked. And one of the reasons for that is that so that they will not enjoy all of their days as they continue to live in wickedness. That's what David was saying there in that psalm. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 10, verse 27, it says, "The fear of the Lord prolongs days, but the years of the wicked will be shortened." Again, if all things were equal and we lived in a totally uniform world, that will always be true, but that isn't always so, because there are people who are in right relationship with God and so on, and they die young. So this is not a absolute truth we are talking about here, but he's saying that it is better to live in the fear of the Lord because there's blessings. There are blessings associated with that, and sometimes it's longevity. But we know all too well that it's not always so. There are some, wicked people who live into their 80s and 90s, and we wish they had died earlier. And then there are some people who are morally upright and so on. They die suddenly while very young, and we can't explain it. Let me move on quickly to the book of Ecclesiastes, another book that you need to be very careful when you take things from this book. Do not, Ecclesiastes 7:17, do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish, meaning try to live a balanced life. Don't destroy yourself seeking too much wisdom or seeking too much a life of wickedness. Why, it continues, why should you die before your time? So somebody says, see, it's possible to die before your time. This is just a plea to lead a balanced life. Don't rush headlong into anything in this world. It may end up with you losing your life unnecessarily. But again, this is not necessarily an absolute truth. I was saying about an illustration of a coin. I have a coin here, and it, of course, has two sides. You can't have a coin with one side. Picture one side of this coin being the sovereignty of God. God is in absolute control. Nothing happens without him knowing it or without him allowing it. The other side of the coin represents human will. You can't have one without the other. If there's no human will, then human beings are puppets. There's no need for a judgment. God alone makes all the decisions, and everything is fate. God wanted it that way. That's the way God wanted it. Human beings have no choice in the matter. Well, then there's no need for judgment. The Bible reveals, however, that there is human will and responsibility. We will be held accountable for the choices we make. So how do you balance that? You must have both. You can't have one without the other. And the Bible presents a balance. And that's why we can't say yes or no to this question. Yes, it's in our eyes, from the human standpoint, we may feel that person died before his time. The person died in their teens, and so we say the person died before his time, gone too soon. But from a divine perspective, the sovereignty of God, God knew the end from the beginning. So you can't say that for God, that person died before their time, because then it means that what God had purposed did not come to pass. And it's a very, very difficult scenario, but both doctrines, the doctrine of the sovereignty of God and the doctrine of human responsibility, must be kept together in balance, or else you're going to get a problem somewhere else in the Bible. So yes, God knows the end from the beginning. So Isaiah 46:10 tells us that God declares the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done. That's the sovereignty of God. But we are responsible for our actions. If we live a reckless life, we may find ourselves dying, quote unquote, before our time. But it does not mean that we know when our time should be. God alone knows when our time is. And God may determine a person's time may be 10 years on this earth. We don't know that. That is beyond our ability to know. God has reserved that for himself. So I know it sounds like I've made it all complicated, but remember the coin. There must be two sides. God's sovereignty says God alone knows what is the appointed time for any human being to live here on this earth. And because of that, because of the sovereignty of God, we cannot say it happened before time. It happened when God wanted it to happen. But from a human standpoint, we may say, yes, it looks like if the person died too young, because we are only looking at one side of the coin, the human responsibility side. That's as best as I could do with an issue like that. You can't have one without the other. Yes and no are the answers to that question, depending on which side of the coin you're looking at it from. The divine side, God says the person's time is up. The human side, it may appear to us the person did not live to the fullness of what he or she should have lived, and we would have wanted them to live here even longer. My name is Patrick Antwine. I hope that didn't leave it as muddy as mud water. I tried my best with that question. I hope it helps. And if you have a question you'd like me to attempt to answer, use the email on the screen and I'll try my best to provide an answer. Until the next time, grace and peace be multiplied to you.